I want to talk about bouquet fillers with you today, but not just any fillers. I specifically want to talk about my top 5 fillers for the summertime bouquets for the summer months. And these are fillers that I want to call never-ending fillers, and that has to do with their staying power, be it the fact that they last a long time on the plant or that they are productive, cut and come again. But they are flowers that are going to give me blooms from June and all the way into the fall. Fillers are incredibly important in floral design. They fill spaces between more important flowers. They help to give accents to the designs, and they help to complete a design. But as a florist turned grower, I discovered another reason why fillers are important, and that is because they also help us to bulk up our bouquets and to bring some more interest and some more beauty that helps to showcase the really important flowers in the bouquet, but they are inexpensive. So they are able to help us increase our size on our flowers while not having to increase our price point, giving us the ability to offer a better perceived value on our products and helping us to sell more flowers. So let's dig right into these top 5 flowers that you will find every single year on my own farm. I'm going to talk about what my favorite varieties that I use are. And if I have any growing tips, I'm going to mention those. And I also want to talk with you about how to use each specific flower in floral design and in market bouquets. Our first flower is Statice. Statice is going to be your classical filler flower by the definition of what a filler flower is. So it has a stem that then branches and supports multiple smaller flowers all on a cluster. This is important because this dictates what that flower is going to do for us in designs. But before I go there, I want to mention why I enjoy Statice in the cut flower garden. One of the major things that I appreciate about Statice is that it really bulks up my bouquets. So for my flower stand, for market style bouquets, it's such a winner because even just 1 or 2 stems helps to bulk up that bouquet and give it some size and some color and really helps add to the perceived value. It's also a productive flower on the farm. It's super productive, cut and come again. One of the keys with growing Statice to make sure that it keeps producing is to make sure that you stay on top of harvesting. Keep cutting the flowers and it will keep sending more flowers. If you live in a really hot area, you might try shading. I believe Statice aren't super happy in the 30 degrees weather. I think they like the mid to low 20 degrees Celsius. In terms of my customers, Statice is also excellent because it has such a long phase life. So for one of those flowers that's going to keep people coming back, keep them happy and have them coming back for more flowers, Statice is great for that. Bonus, it's a dryable flower, so any stem that I don't send out fresh, I can hang up and dry and sell later on in the season. I can sell in dried wreaths and I can use them in fresh Christmas wreaths as well. So I get a whole lot of mileage out of my Statice. I haven't always been super excited about Statice. I actually grew up around a commercial Statice farm. My grandfather was a grower of Statice, and my mom's house was festooned with all sorts of bunches of dried Statice, and I didn't think it was particularly special, but as a grower now, I've come to really appreciate it. And the nice thing is there are some really wonderful new, more interesting colors on the market aside from the traditional blues and purples and whites and pinks. And there seems to be continuing development of some of these really nice and more subtle, softer, and more versatile colors. So my top 2 colors that I get the most use out of are apricot and white. Apricot, of course, is a peachy kind of hue. So on the color wheel, it's sitting in between a couple of different colors, giving us the ability to swing with it into pink palettes, but also into orangey palettes. So it's a great flower for doing double duty in designs. And in terms of using Statice in a design as a typical filler flower, we're going to want to use it in the spaces to fill the gaps and to sit behind or below our more important flowers when we're layering. We don't want the Statice to come winging out and cover up our more important flower like our sunflowers or our dahlias. Let's move on to number 2. And by the way, these are in no particular order, but the next one I want to talk about is sweet peas. So sweet peas are really wonderful, particularly because of their fragrance, but also because of their shape and texture. They are the flower that's going to bring for me the gardeny style, the natural movement, and the whimsical look that puts my bouquets right into a trend category and really captures that feeling. They're super easy to grow, and for me, I can have them flowering in my hoop house as early as mid-May, and then they just will keep on flowering as long as I keep on harvesting. They'll keep going through the summer. If you're in a hot area, you could try growing them in a spot that gets some afternoon shade. Also, look into some of the more heat-tolerant varieties. For me, my favorite varieties are Janet Scott, and I also use several of the Elegance sweet peas. Those have been really great for me in my Zone 8B type of climate. But I haven't tried too many other ones. This year I've added Susie Z and Piggy Sue and a few others, so it'll be interesting to see how things do, and maybe I can report back with a fuller picture for you later on in the growing season. In terms of harvest and design, with sweet peas, you want to harvest them when there are buds, when there still is a few buds left on the stem. If you harvest when all of the stem is open and all the flowers are open, you're not going to get the optimal vase life. And I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about using sweet peas, I'm not talking about just cutting the flower, although that is beautiful. And if you grow in your hoop house, you can get really nice long stem lengths on your sweet peas. But what I actually do is I cut the flower with the vine. So I'm cutting a multi-branching item. And that is what I love about sweet peas. I try to get them early in the morning when it's cool out, because I've noticed that sweet peas sometimes will want to wilt in the heat on my flower stand. So getting them early and then giving them a good long conditioning period, and I'll even sometimes use quick dip. And sometimes I'll just pick off a few of the larger leaves that might want to be wilting. And in terms of design, there's two things going on with a sweet pea. So the vine is really beautiful, and I'm happy for it to be coming out of the bouquet and spilling out over the edges of the wrap. For the flower, I'm wanting to have some of the flower above the plain level of the bouquet and some of the flower below that plain level. So it's kind of almost a linear element, and I want to getting a little bit of that showing above the bouquet, somewhat like a line flower would be. The next one is Monarda or bee balm. I think that this one is pretty underrated because I don't really hear too many people talking about using Monarda in their bouquets. And I do wonder if it's because it has a little bit of a spicy, pungent fragrance that perhaps some people don't like. But I really love this one. First of all, it's a perennial, so it's super easy to deal with, and I don't have to constantly plant it every year. You know I love perennials for the cutting garden. Secondly, it's a never-ending flower for me in the sense that I can use it even before it flowers. So I'll use it earlier in the season when it's just the foliage, and I'll just have that as a foliage item in my bouquets. And then later on, when the flower starts blooming, I have found that they last a long time, and I can pretty much just use them at any stage and all the way to when the flower is done and we're starting to get funky green seed heads. They bulk up a bouquet and they really add this whimsy and this interest. They're easy to grow from seed, so that's a really great way to get a whole lot of Monarda really cheaply. I have one called Panorama Mix, which is like a berry colored blend, but it does have some softer pastel-y tones in it too, so it's pretty useful. I also will dry the blooms. They're beautiful in dried work as well. And in terms of design, when there's little flowers on the Monarda, I love having those poking up a little bit higher and floating a little bit higher in the design. They bring a lot of interest and whimsy and texture to the bouquets. The next one is Achillea. Achillea, again, is a perennial, so win-win. It also self-seeds like crazy, so that could be good or bad, depending, but watch out for that. Safe to say, if you ever have Achillea, you'll probably never not have it again. Achillea is a little bit less productive than, say, a Statice, but as far as perennials go, it's super productive. A lot of perennials, and you know I love perennials, and I have perennials all over this place, But a lot of them have a specific season in which they're blooming. And the nice thing about Achillea is if you just keep cutting it, it'll just keep blooming. And it even seems to perform well in cooler fall temperatures. Again, it's a great filler, not quite as bulky as a Statice, but it fills in the plane of a bouquet really nicely. It adds a beautiful texture. It's almost a prettier type of flower than a Statice just because the little flowers are so dainty. It adds a really beautiful darling texture to bouquets. So again, it works great as a support to other flowers just to fill spaces and add beauty. But one of the particular things that I love about Achillea is that it can also function as a meadowy, wiry, airy flower. So the stems are really long and straight and thin, and on top of that stem you have a dainty little disc-shaped flower. And I find that in a meadow style arrangement, it acts a lot like a Queen Anne's lacewood. It can just extend and float within the design or above the design in a really dainty, beautiful way. So it really gives a lot of versatility there in terms of its uses for us. Again, Achillea is also one that can be dried. I've always found it to shrink quite a bit though, dried. I just don't find it to be super bulky. It's really pretty to add little nuggets of texture into a dried wreath, but I have found that to be a bit of an issue for me. But there are lots of colors available, and one of the colors that I've actually just ordered seeds for is one of the more standard traditional goldy yellow ones. It's called Parker's Variety, and I have a feeling that that type of Achillea is gonna dry a lot more substantially for me. That being said, I grow summer berries and summer pastels, and they're both really wonderful berry blend mixes of Achillea that are super, super useful in a lot of my work. And last but not least is Sedum. I'm going to attempt to say this word. This is the type of Sedum that I'm talking about. It's the type that's taller and suitable for cut flowers. Hylotelephium. I'm not sure if I got that right, but that's my best try. So Sedum is amazing. Talk about a flower that has holding power. It shoots up in the spring and is again a classic filler of a stem that branches, has flowers on top, and it's green. It's a beautiful neutrally green kind of color that you can use as a filler in your spring designs. And then as the season progresses, the flowers that you didn't cut, they start to blush up, and then they slowly get more vibrant. And then even into the fall, they turn a really beautiful coppery, rusty kinds of tones, and they can be cut and used in designs at any of those stages. So they're really amazing. And the only downside, I guess I would say, is that they are not a cut and come again. So once you cut one flower off, that's it. So you may need to account for having extra plants just to make sure you have enough stems to pull from. They're super bulky. They really help to size up a bouquet. They're also really easy to grow. They are so not fussy. And the nice thing about Sedum too in a perennial garden is they're more of a compact type plant. They don't get too gangly like most perennials do, so they're a lot easier to deal with for weed maintenance. If you leave your flowers on the plant, technically you can't dry Sedum. I've tried, it just will never dry. It will take so long and then it won't be beautiful when it's done. But if you leave it out on the plant and let it dry naturally, and you get it before it gets too soggy in the fall or the winter, you can get some really beautiful browned, beautiful stems that are great to work with in dried arrangements. There are some really cool varieties of sedums available now too. So my main one is the classic Autumn Joy, which most people have heard of, and it's a really good, durable one. I've never had disease issues with it. In fact, my crop that I work with now, I've had for about 20 years because it all came from one plant that I got as a kid from one of my dad's colleagues at the flower auction. So pretty amazing. It's made the moves with me, and it's really, really quickly propagates into many, many plants. I also have some various black sedums. I would encourage you to have a look around. There's some really cool ones. There's some that are more pastel. There are some that blush up into bright hot pink lipstick colors in the fall, and they're all really delightful. So check those out. And in terms of designing with sedum, I want to mention one really special thing about them, and that is that they can work as a natural mechanic for you in designs. So if you're doing a vase arrangement with a somewhat narrow vase, you can stick a short sedum right at the throat of your vase, and you can poke other stems through it and it'll act to hold your stems in place. Likewise, if you're working in a lower arrangement with chicken wire, like in a bowl, you can use the sedum down low. It'll cover your mechanic and again add another layer of support for your other flowers. So it's really cool that way. And of course, in bouquets, again, it works if you use it at the plane level to support your other flowers below or behind your more important flowers. It works really well for that. And then two more that I want to mention, and I'll mention also why they didn't quite make the list, but I have two more. The first one is phlox, annual phlox. I also have perennial phloxes, but they're a whole different kettle of fish. But annual phloxes are pretty productive. They're pretty impressive. They get started in the spring and they'll go through. And the reason why I didn't add them into, they didn't make it into the top 5 for me is just because they're not quite as bulky. They're not serving quite as much to bulk up and size up a bouquet. But they're really beautiful. Of course, they have beautiful fragrance and they're a beautiful form in a bouquet. So that is a really worthy one. They will keep producing as long as you keep cutting them. And even the ones that don't make the netting and kind of get all wonky, I even love those because they're beautiful spilling out of a bowl on a table. They're very graceful. In terms of colors, if you were only growing one, I would probably recommend one like cherry caramel, which again is in the peachy family. So it's really quite versatile. It also has a little shot of magenta or pink in it. So it gives us a lot of room to work with in a design. But another one that I grew last year was Beauty Mix, and it was really quite wonderful. I actually grew it for my garden, and I didn't realize I was going to get such amazingly long stems off of it, and I ended up using it for a lot of design work as well. It comes in a beautiful blend of magenta and fuchsia and pastel pinks and whites and even some bluish lavenders. I don't always prescribe or recommend growing mixes, but that one came in handy for me in a few instances with special important large vase arrangements that I needed to fill. So that one might be worth checking out. Finally, I want to mention Matricaria or Feverfew. This one didn't make it into my top 5, and that's just because it didn't start really flowering for me until July, and I wasn't able to use it in bouquets until then. This last year was my first year growing this one though, so that may have just been user error. But it's a really nice filler. It's really beautiful, adds lovely texture and fullness to bouquets. The only one little trouble that I have with it is that it has to be somewhat matured before you use it or it gets a bit wilty. So it can be a bit finicky that way and a bit irritating to cut them and realize you've cut them too early, but still a worthy filler. And really, there's the cute little daisy style, which is the ones that I had, but there's also some other really cool forms and tones as well. So there's a little bit of variety there for us to work with as well. So that's the rundown. I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Drop those in the comments. Love hearing from you. Hopefully those design tips were helpful for you and help you to start to frame up viewing some of these flowers, not so much for what they are themselves, but the purpose that they serve in designs. If we can look at flowers more for the purpose that they're going to fulfill and categorize them that way, it starts to make our design decisions as well as our growing decisions a lot simpler and a lot more effective. Thanks for hanging with me today, and I'll see you next time.